Let's take a general information about the Turkish people. Turkish people, not Turkish. Turkish is one dialect of Turkish that is spoken into the Turkey country, but Turkish people is more vast and wide, from the east of Asia to the middle of the Europe. The country of the Turkish people: Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, Turkey, and a lot of provinces in Russia Federation, China, and most population of the Iran. More than half of the population in Iran are Turkish people, more than 40 million. Turkish people provinces into the Russia. Sakha province, that's a big and wide province in the north of the Yakutia, also they call. Chuvashistan, Kazan, that Tatar Turks lives there, Chechnya, and into the Caucasian, a lots of Turkish tribes. They live in a various areas, but last century actually wasn't kind to the Turkish people. The other side in World War, they won the battle and they began to falsify, let's say that we see the world from their point of view, and they don't like that's a normal, because other side was the Turkish people and there was a rivalry between them to take the land. Why? Let's look at very briefly into the history of the Turkish people. When we look at the China, we can see the Uyghurs, Khagans. The Uyghurs is one part of the China country right now. You can search that as a Xinjiang, but historically this name is East Turkestan, and Uyghur people is one part of the Turkish people there. In the north of the China, also the Tuva Turks, the other part of the Turks. In the middle, Salar Turks. In a Yellow River, around the Yellow River, you can find another parts of the Turks that name is Salar, Salazo in a Chinese language, they say. So you can move into the Mongolia, and you will find the remains of the Yuan dynasty. The Chinese knows that era as a Yuan dynasty, but that's a Turkish Mongolian era. Chinggis Khan, maybe you heard that. Everyone heard that. Chinggis Khan is very famous in the history of the world, that has a big and very deep impact. Chinggis Khan actually wasn't just from the Mughal people. There was a unity from Turkish and Mongolian people that based on a beliefs of shamanic. The shamanic beliefs makes a unity. That in the past that was normal. They gather to around the one beliefs, and that circle of beliefs that makes them societies, and that was really normal into the history. So look at the Korea history. One important part of the Korean history is the Shilla Empire, and that was really tied with the Turkish empires. In the east, come to the west, the place we can find the oldest document of the Turkish people. 4,000 years ago, into the Assyrian document, we can find the Turk people that consider Turk people around Urmia Lake, which is now located into the Iran, the part of Iran that actually is a part of historical Azerbaijan. Now you can find it with South Azerbaijan. If you search that, you will find out the area of the Turkish people, the most population of the Turkish people in Iran. But in other sides of the Iran also, the various parts of Turks in the south of Iran, the Kashgai Turks living, they have a population among 5 million, something like that. In the east, near to the Afghanistan, you can find the Khorasan Turks and other tribes that spread into all the country of Iran. Like the other countries, the east of Europe, you can find lots of the tribes, the Turkish tribes, and mostly we don't know a real and exact information about the Turkish people. Now we have a little information about the history of Korea and China and effects of the Turkish people there. Let's go on India. India is more than 3,000 years ruled by the Turkish empires. One part before the colonialism in 1842, that's taken by the Britain, and they changed the traditional way of ruling the whole India. Before of that was the Turkish empires that begins with the Saka Turks, like 3,000 years ago, and then changed to the Kushanid, and then changed to the Heptalid. But that's a Hun Empire, another name used by the Roman Empire for the Hun people. Hun Empire is the Heptalian. So in some origins you can find, and that's confusing. That they use also for confusing the people to not understand the holy history of the Turkish people. They always use a Turkified word to consider the Turkish people. Into the China they Turkified this area. Into the Iran they used also the same, because that's a matter of the seeing the world from the other views that affected by the winning in a world war. So that's mostly political, and that's not a right information. That's mostly goes as theories and not proved theories. Like they consider the Saka people as a non-Turkish people, Iranian people. What's Iranian? We don't know. Which language is that? What's the base of that people? Actually, what you know as a Persian language is a one dialect of the Turkish. Lastly, changed and falsified to another classification. That's all theories of the language classification, Indo-European, you know that? But most of the last research on the language that shows this language is come from the Turkish empires, and they mostly use that as a lingua franca, like the 3,000 years into the India in one period, like a last 1,000 years, they began to using this language, which original name is Dari, as a lingua franca, the language, the simplified language between the people. The construction of the language is a pidgin language, is a Croat language that's mostly used and appeared when the people began to trade together, and that has a root into the Silk Road. They began to gather together, Arab people, Turkish people, Indian people, and they began to have a communication, and from this communication the language, the simplified language of mix of Arabic, Turkish, Hindi comes out. And then the Turkish empires as a Ghaznavid, then the Delhi Sultanate, Baburi, you can search it as a Mughal empire that has a tendency of the Western, the other side, history writing about the Turkish people, about the Turkish dynasties into that. So that dynasties, they used Dari language. But lastly, what happened to that in India after 1,000 years? The Britain began to takes over all the India. They have to change the lingua franca and change it to the English. So the previous language was so-called Persian. That's interesting. That so-called Persian, and now is shifted to the Iran and based into the Iran with some changing of the ideas, putting the ideology into the matter of history to control the people's mind, and falsification, all this matters. So this language, what we heard as a Persian, is actually the Dari language that's used into the India, and that's a mixed language. So that's a one dialect of Turkish. We can consider it as a theory. Now you can just think about that as a theory, but the time will show all the truths. The most known part of Turkish language and Turkish people is in Turkey, because it has wide communication with the people of the world, and so that's easy to people to know the Turkish. And the most of the people, they know Turkish and Turkish people and language just in Turkey, but that's not right. That's not right. The Turkish people are a very vast people. The keyword Turkish people, you can search it and find general information, checking the maps. And so in India, we have a deep history with the Indian people. So north of India actually is a mixed of the Indian people and the Turkish people. That's a kind of a border among them. But the long time ruling that country, so that has consequences. That's normal, because you are there, you have a cooperation to rule the country, and this cooperation, this concept of ruling the country, that has consequences, like a so-called Pakistan, the Pakistan from the old semi-continent of the India. Ordu is a Turkish word that used for the military, and lots of Ordu people, they has a Turkish roots, like a Anzo Turks into the Pakistan, into the Afghanistan. Also north of Afghanistan is called South Turkestan, and the cities are mostly the Turkish people, like tribes from the Afshar and the other Uzbek Turks, and another part, and various the tribes of the Turks, the old tribes, and the cities, like the Balkh city is a one Turkish name, like a Pekanbalık into the China, that has a Turkish root. So into the Pakistan, we can see the deep influence, or just we can say the Turkish people, because actually that's the Turkish people. So one part of them, like Urdu people mostly, because the most part of the Urdu, which is like, I think about NATO, there was something like that into the past. So the people gathered there for the Islamic unity, and they makes a Urdu, makes a big military, like a NATO. So the big part of it are Turkish people. Also the Arab people, also Hindi people are consisted Urdu nation. Nowadays you can you know that the Urdu language, Urdu nation, so that comes from that unity, like a Dari language, so-called Persian. The Urdu has the same concept, but the language for the Urdu, that's taken from the Arabic, Turkish, Hindi, that's something for the military. But the language for the Dari is some governmental, for mostly the poems, the way of spreading the Islam, that mostly was based on a Dari language into the East. That the poems, the alims, the big the sourceful people, they gathered there into the derbar, which means governmental place, and they began to make poems and introducing the Islamic idea into the poem. So the way the language of Islam into the East changed to be a Dari, so-called Persian language, and that was a Pidgin and montage language from the Croat Pidgin. So that's a classification of this kind of language. So we can see a Turkish people from East of Asia in the middle of Europe, like a Gagauz people into the Balkans. Also, we have lots of effect. Let's go to another place. The area of the Memluk into the Egyptian part, 300 years. The Arab origins that calls that the Dawlatul Atrak into the Egyptian. That's a Turkish country, and into the history that has effects there. So we have assimilated Turks there also, not just in the Middle East, into the Iraq. We have around 2 to 5 million Turks that call them Turkmens, mostly into the north of Iraq, and into the Syria also. The Turkmen people, Turkmen is a word used for the Turk people who changed to the Islam, and they say Turk Iman, and Turk Iman in a time that changed to the Turkmen. But mostly historically they are Turks. They're no different between the all part of the Turkish part, but the classification of Turkish language is like that. The Oghuz Turks, which consist of the Turkey, the Iraq Turks, the Iran Turks, the Azerbaijan Turks into the Caucasian region, like Ahasca Turks. Ahasca Turks mostly was centered into the Georgia, but Stalin, they took them and they the Soviet era, they pushed the people to have a the forced immigrant. So the last era wasn't very kind for the Turkish people into the Iran for changing the history. And like in the First World War, all around the world we can see just 18 million died from the World War, but just into the Iran you can revise, you can see that the 10 million people died into the World War, among the World War. And that's something unusual. And more than half of the population died into the Iran. So some things happens there. And when we put these things around that, like the lingua franca in India and the changing the falsification of the history into the Iran, and when we put all of them, like the last governments more than 1,000 years into the Iran, the so-called Iran, is the Turkish empires, like a Seljuk Empire, Safavid Empire, Qajar Empire, Akkoyunlu, Karakoyunlu, more than 1,000 years. And into the very historical time, like 2,000 years ago, we can visit the Suryani people into the Sassanid era. Suryani and Turkish people, some kings are well known as a Turkish root. So the era, the century wasn't kind to the Turks, toward the Turks, and that keep going. They not stopped of the thing. So when we put some information around each other, like in Iran history, to looking at deeply what happened there, we can see the big change and falsifying of all truth. So the matter, the talking about the Turkish history is mostly defense of what happens against them, against the Turkish people all around the world. In the Soviet era, from the China, the Uyghur people, that what happens there into the Iran more than other places. So this is the Turkish people and Turkish language. Partly, the most of it is known as Oghuz Turkish, which is Uyghurs, Turkmens, Azerbaijan, Turkey, and the Turks of the Iraq mostly. But the other part, like Hungary, that's the Oghur Turks. Chuvashistan, that's the Oghur Turk. The Attila. Let's go to the part of the East Europe and the Turkish history there. In East Europe, we can find the Khazar Empire, which was a Turkish Jewish empire for 500 years. Think about that. America is around the 300, and there was twice time of that, the America's history. The Khazar Empire, mostly the part of Iran, North Caucasian, and the Kiev city is made by the Khazar Empire. That's so interesting. And the Avar Empire, before that the Hun Empire, Attila Hun Empire. The new form of the Europe that they said mostly appeared by the Hun Empire, because Attila beat the Roman Empire, and the Roman Empire called them a barbarian. They began to settle some various place of the Europe. So the Germanic tribe, like a Frank tribe, that goes to the France, and the German people, they were in a harmony with the Turkish people during the Hun Empire, and then Avar Empire more than 500 years, and that was also a shamanic beliefs together. So the new shape of Europe also appeared in effect of the Turkish empires into the east of the Europe. That most I'm not talking about Ottomans. That's a very new era. I'm talking about the 2000 years ago. Like you can search the keywords Hun Empire, Attila, and the Avar Empire, Khazar Empire. So this part is the western part of the Turkish people, and mostly they don't show this part of the history, and they want to show the Turkish people just from the east. Always they say they come from the east, but that's not true. All the Turkish tribes always were in movement. They continuously move between the Turkish lands, but the east part is really different from the west part. You can see the differences of the like geography into the face of the people, but western part of the Turkish people is mostly the central, because the most like the Sumerian consider as a Persian. So that's the infrastructure of the Mesopotamia is made by the Sumerian people. They have a lots of Turkish words into the in common with the nowadays Turkish. Also, that's not just a one reason that most of the researchers they consider the Sumerian as a Persian. They have the same beliefs. They call the god Dingir, which is the same in the Turkish language. We say Tengri. In shamanic, that comes from the shamanic, but also keep going into the nowadays, into the our language. So the beliefs also is same. Like the underground word is Yergal, Erlik, like today the shamanic, what we know as the Turkish shamanic beliefs. Saman word actually is a original for the shaman. So Saman in a Turkish just has a meaning that means the soulful person. Sa means thinking, and Saman man means like a exaggerating of something, making like a lots of it, like a kocaman. Man makes a lots of it. So Sumerian and then Elamite, and most of the Iran history is about the Turkish people, but we talk about that's a lots of misinformation about the Iran history to change the facts about the so-called Persian language, which is originally Dari and appeared into the India. Mostly the numbers of India of this language, but most part of it is Turkish. So we look at the various corners of the Turkish people a little into the language, but we will keep going on the general information about the Turkish people, because lastly they falsified everything about the Turkish people.